Welcome to the Consummate Athlete Podcast, where we explore what it means to be a well-rounded, happy, goal-crushing athlete. Every week, myself, sports journalist Molly Herford, and cycling coach and kinesiologist Peter Glassford interview experts and chat through all of your training questions. We're excited to have you along for the ride. Hello. Welcome back to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. I actually almost forgot to say Consummate Athlete Podcast because, frankly, I have been podcasting up a storm lately.
You probably didn't know which podcast to introduce.
Took me a second. So before we get into all things Consummate Athlete, if you are following Tour de France Femmes, you can listen to stage-by-stage recaps over on the Queen Stage Women's Cycling podcast that I am doing with 3 other amazing cycling journalists. And of course, Strong Girl Talk with my good friend, Dr. Sasha Galish. We just had an amazing guest, Timea Porter, on last week. So really just kicking off today's Consummate Athlete episode with an ad for my other podcasts. With that, Peter, how's it going?
It's going well. We're training away here. We had lots of big races for athletes we coach. On the weekend, we had the local 8-hour, which is always a big throwdown, the summer 8-hour by our friends over at Pulse Racing and Hardwood Ski and Bike. So a couple athletes in that one, which went well. And what else do we have? We had the Leadville Race Series. So this is taking on that Leadville 100 course in 3 stages. And it looked like a great women's race, not to take away from the men's race. But let's be honest, the women's race was quite, it was a very deep field and great. White race to watch, and then we had a few athletes taking that on as well, and it went fantastic as well. So shout out to those athletes. I'm trying to think if I'm forgetting any other events that were happening this weekend.
Well, I was down at the Rooted Mountain Bike Festival in Bemis Point, New York, which was
sort of Western New York,
upstate New York, pretty close to actually Erie, Pennsylvania, like very close to the border, and it was between 150 and 200 women just hanging out, spending the weekend on mountain bikes, doing different clinics, workshops. I was there. I got to do a couple talks, got to do my saddle sore talk that I haven't done in a while. And this was the best crowd that I've ever had for that talk. We had so much fun.
You said it was one of the biggest you've done it for.
Yeah, I think had like 50 or 60 women just sitting around talking about saddles and chamois and all of that fun stuff. It was just a really fun weekend for, honestly, kind of remembering that a lot of the time, we take this very seriously. And, obviously on this podcast, we're talking about training and racing and nutrition and kind of all of these, how to be a better athlete. But this reminded me that the number one thing for, any of us that aren't doing this for a paycheck should always be the fun of it. And I mean, these women were having fun. It was the coolest thing. Actually, a few of them, most of them were from the U.S., but a couple of them, shout out to the Sunflower crew from Canada, but also a few of them were mentioning the 24-hour that we have up here. What is the name?
Summer solstice.
Yeah. I knew it was solstice. I just couldn't remember the exact name. So a lot of people have that as a goal, which again, I thought was cool because these are women that aren't necessarily in it racing super seriously, but they absolutely love doing it. And events like that and the 8-hour are really great chances for people who don't necessarily want to race, but they want to be in the scene, if you will.
Yeah, they're great events. I was just describing it actually to someone I was doing a skills session at Albion where the 24-hour happens on the weekend. And I was sort of describing how it's sort of a neat mashup of people who it's their only bike ride of the year, maybe in some cases their first bike ride of their life, which sometimes that is a little interesting, up to some pros usually come out and try and get the fastest lap time. So it's quite a fun event, and it all just sort of starts and ends in a campground usually. So those 24-hour events, something like the old Pueblo down in Tucson area, Arizona. And then also, I think actually this past weekend, that was the other one I was trying to remember. I think the 24-hour, I don't know if it's the World Championships, but it's in Canmore, Alberta, like one of the bigger 24 hours from the world stage, at least, was in Canmore, Alberta this past weekend. So
cool.
Yeah, really big weekend of racing.
Awesome. And I think that lends itself nicely to talking about our first question we have, which is about making event-specific training more specific, or really how specific should you make?
There's 2 question marks. There's like the editor's note question mark and then the question mark for the question on that question.
Oh, boy. This is a meta question.
Yeah, so it's like one of these things where people will want to... that was sort of the main gist of the question, right?
How to make event-specific training more specific. So we've got specific in there twice. So, say you are training for the 24-hour summer solstice, for example. Like, would you, how do you make your training for that more specific. And there's a bunch of ways for a 24-hour, especially. There's a bunch of ways you could think about that. Like, should you be waking up at 2 a.m. to do middle of the night laps? Should you just train on a 5-mile circuit, or, train with the exact same elevation as the race? Like, all that kind of stuff.
Sure. Yeah, so that is a good question. I think that question had another sort of sub-layer. Maybe it got cut in editing. And when I say the editor, it's either me or Molly who's doing the editing. But I think there was like a sub-question of like trying to make it almost a little more hacky, or I'm trying to think of other words to describe this, where maybe it isn't specific. It might seem like it's almost like trying to make it harder. So in things like that, I started thinking about the fasting stuff, where it's like, we'll just make endurance training harder than endurance training already is.
Oh, okay. So it is, you have the next sentence. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on interesting ways we can make the event-specific training more difficult than the events themselves.
Right.
So actually training, yeah, I'm trying to. So for the 24-hour example, you would not sleep for 24 hours
Sure.
and then go out and do like a 6-hour ride.
And maybe only at night. But then even that's like, okay, like I see it, but then, yeah, but also not eat, because you want to really tax your body more or something. Or only do, I mean, even this heat training, which I love the heat training, I think there's something to it, can be taken too far very quickly, right? So I think whenever it gets into a little hacky, and when I say hacky, I don't mean in an offensive way. It's just some of this stuff is not the thing. So we might think it's specific because it's hard. And I think sometimes specific can start meaning like it's just really hard. So, this would be get into the territory of using a heavier bike or something like that, where it's the fastest people in the world tend to just do their intervals on their bike. And so it's a mountain biker going up a hill really hard. Van der Poel, or who do you want to pick? Nino, Yolanda Neff, like they're going to go out and ride their actual mountain bike on similar terrain and just do intervals. And they could ride longer, or they could maybe accumulate more intensity time than even in the race potentially. So that to me is like, okay, that's specific. Maybe that's getting harder than the demands of some of the races. But you have to be careful that you don't just mean like this is getting miserable, or this is a one-time hero workout that never happens again. Because the heart of the thing is you're not actually spending, if you're not spending time doing the actual thing, then that's bad training. And if you can't do it again, and you violated this concept of consistency, then that's bad training. So that's where we get into trouble with Strava, where it's, I posted my one-time Strava workout of 4 hours and I went really hard the whole time. But what you don't see in the Strava stuff is that person's debilitated, not motivated, injured for months, if not years, and they never come back. So that's why we want to be careful with the specificity stuff.
I think it's also maybe it's like the rule of one bonus stimulus, whether it's, whether we're talking about, fasted training in certain situations, or heat training in certain situations, or like going out in the middle of the night in certain situations. Like, you can't go out fasted in your heat suit at 2 a.m. Like,
right. Which sounds like an exaggeration, but that's what people will do. They'll have oval chain rings. They'll have all this stuff. And it's just, I remember a friend, because I'll say this, it's coming from a place of love, because like I was that person, and I'll say,
I was just gonna say Peter was this guy.
I would say my career was blunted heavily by this type of stuff. I don't think it's completely my fault, but it's ultimately my fault. And so I think that Molly's rule is great. Like, you don't want to spend a disproportionate amount of time on hacks, because the actual stuff is what's going to give you the benefit. So doing your endurance training and fueling it and then recovering is going to be good, because you're going to do it again and again and again for like 8 to 16 years and find out how good you're going to be.
Well, we always say, like, it's the basics, right? Like, most people, and we had Dr. Scott Fry on last week talking about cognitive overload.
People
and everything.
Seem to really like that episode.
It was a really good episode. Yeah. If you haven't listened to it, go back and listen to it. But I think what kind of came out of that is, as normal people with normal jobs that aren't getting paid to ride our bikes, it's already impressive if we can do the training that was prescribed and fuel it and fuel around it and get enough sleep and not feel burnt to a crisp at all times. So if you're doing that, then we can even start to have the conversation about adding any of these, like turning any of these other dials.
You're exactly right. And these people, we say, like, the people we work with are so inspiring and amazing. Like, they have so much going on. Like, I am pretty privileged in that, like, I can ride and we don't have children that we're chasing around. It's part of my job. So like, I get to ride, and I acknowledge that. But these people who are, they're getting up at 5 or 6 a.m. to fit in the bike riding, which is the piece of fun just for them in the day, is amazing. But the catch is that these folks sometimes want to get into these things that are sort of a little hacky. And so the thing would be, if Nino Schurter just goes and does his 5x3 minute hill intervals and he just does it on his fast mountain bike, maybe it's not completely tricked out like the race because he doesn't want to have, fancy wheels smash, but it's all very light and normal bicycle. And he goes up the hill and he says that was a hard set of intervals. Then probably the rest of us can, like mountain biking or biking is hard enough just going up a hill or doing a sprint or we don't necessarily have to make it harder. That would be odd to have to make it harder.
For sure. I think you can, how do I put this? You can sex up your training by kind of like tricking yourself into feeling as though it's a hack. Like for example, so my example is this week I'm covering Tour de France Femmes. So my normal training hour that I do mid-morning, normally I work in the morning and then I train and then I have lunch and then I keep working. That's getting messed up because I'm trying to cover the Tour de France Femmes. So as a result, I'm training later in the afternoon. And I am telling myself that this is a training hack because I race 100 milers, which means that I am running at all hours of the day in the race. Mm-hmm. So for me, like actually training after breakfast and after I've eaten lunch and after I've already like worked all morning, it's not my ideal training. So I'm kind of trying to convince myself that it's like me trying to do like event specific, like hacking my training to make it more palatable.
I don't even know if that's hack though. Like that's...
Okay, but I think some people want to hack it, right?
Okay, so you're trying to say it's a hack, but you're sort of winking when you say it's a hack.
Exactly. Well, that's what Scott told us last week when we were talking about like when you can use that like mental overload from work when you're feeling a little bit like overwhelmed from all the work and stuff. Just think of that as like great mental like that's endurance training right there. Like you can go out and you can get your workout in and like it feels hard and like you can embrace the fact that it feels hard and crappy instead of like bemoaning it because you can say like, ooh, this is making me stronger in training. So you're really just kind of like hacking your own psychology a little bit.
Well, and we're thinking you could call this a hack or you could call it variety in training. I think variety is important. We don't want to have stagnant training. We don't want to do the same 5x3 minute intervals and the same flat 90-minute endurance ride. There should be some variety in there. And the thing that I love and in my coaching is just if we get out of the trainer basement where there's no variety and we go out into the environment, you're going to see so much different stuff. You're going to see different weather. You're going to see different, all the different iterations of weather. Maybe you're going to ride with people. So all sorts of things will happen. It will be not the steadiest ride. You'll have different routes. So that natural variety in the environment will present itself if you go out and do the sport. And then if you do it in the specific environment that you're supposed to be doing it, i.e. you mountain bike on hilly terrain, if that's where your race is, or gravel terrain if you're a gravel racer, then you start seeing all the iterations. Like the gravel sometimes gets plowed and it's like a sandy thing for 10 miles where you have to go through really loose, deep gravel that's almost like a sand pit. Oh, well, isn't that great? And that was harder than just, pristine. What do we call that gravel that's really nice? I don't know. Really nice gravel. So then you're starting to say, well, that actually just got sprinkled into your environment for you. You didn't have to go find a sand pit and go through it. You could if you were a cyclocross racer, but then again, that would be preparing for the specific demands that we expect on race day. So I think that's the idea, is that we sort of don't diverge too much from what good training would be. And we don't try and necessarily make the training harder. What I said to this person was, especially for the intensity workouts, we want to be really careful that you're not slowing yourself down. And that's what some of these things, if you start fasting in your intensity workout or doing heat training in your intensity workout, which our good friend Stephen Chung, master of all things environmental physiology, said.
Dr. Freeze, I believe he prefers to be.
What? No, Dr. Stephen Chung is the environmental heat.
Yeah. He's also cold.
Oh, Freeze.
Yeah.
I got confused because of Fry.
No, Dr. Freeze.
There's a lot of F words here.
Not that one.
Including this one. Anyhow, Dr. Chung was saying that you don't want to blunt how hard you can go in your intensity. So sometimes people will do their intensity ride, and he said you want to separate the heat training from the intensity ride. Sometimes you could do it after, but that doesn't then, at least you've gone that hard and put that stimulus into your muscles. So that's what we want to do, is try and keep that speed up because we want to be ready for in the race when suddenly the corners are coming faster or the traction is harder to get when you're standing and trying to smash a certain amount of power. And so in the intervals, we don't want to give that chance to be specific up again with some of these things that maybe aren't specific as much as they're just making it a harder effort or slower effort. And so sometimes that gets confused where slower is.
That almost makes me lean into, again, coming back to our sports psychologists we've had on, is are you kind of purposefully like slowing yourself down so that you don't have to compete with yourself? You know what I mean? So you're like, oh, I did my long run fasted, so my pace was slower. Oh, I did this with the heavier bike, so I don't know if it was faster than the time that I did it on my fast bike. Like you're almost setting yourself up to be slower so that you don't actually have to try to beat your old self or try to like perform at your like actual max, because you don't want to know what the answer is.
Yeah, which is like a misunderstanding of training, and that every session is a test. And so what we want to do is start of just being in that environment and accumulating time. Some days are slower and some days are faster. What you will find though is training consistently, it rarely is that much different. And so sometimes we have those error bars set a little too narrow. And you'll see this even with zones. Most people are familiar with zones where the tolerable amount of watts is 2 watts. And I think indoor training sometimes makes this worse, where I need to do my VO2 intervals at 250 watts. Well, I mean, the zone is probably 220 to 265 watts or something like that. So that's a huge percentage. The VO2 zone is from 105% of threshold to 125% in like a Kogan sort of 5 or 6 zone system, usually something like that. So that's 20%, right? And then the fitter you get, the bigger that, the range in watts gets. So it's just a huge tolerable limit that you can go out and ride. And it would be similar for your zone 2 rides. People want to ride at the top. Usually they want to ride above the zone 2 threshold.
Well, it's funny. This is the conversation you and I have been having kind of consistently offline, because I've been working on an article for Runner's World about it, where people tend to get stuck in just like, they forget that it's a zone, right? They get stuck on one power number. They get stuck on one heart rate number, one pace.
Yeah. 8 minute miles for life.
Yep. Well,
and that's the thing, is you end up stuck at 8 minute miles for your life.
I would very much like to get to that point, by the way.
So yeah, you and I have had this. I was having some, and this is I say this is one of those like privileged conversations usually, because some people, again, just to get running and run consistently enough or ride consistently enough is tough. And what you need to start doing is running consistently. And so the pace matters less. But when you start getting consistent and seeing that fitness, then it is a bit of this zone 1 time, which some people start struggling with, spending more time in zone 1 as you get fitter and faster. And so that's, you and I were talking about that, where some of your runs you might want to try doing more of like a steady, what we would call zone 2, and what people might be thinking of when you think of like steady zone 2, visualizing yourself as Pogača or something like that out there drilling it. But then a lot of your training still has to be a little easier, because as you get fitter and fitter, the demands of that zone 2 get so hard.
Side note, my dad is so impressed that I can pronounce Tadej Pogača. Just everyone needs to know that he called me
all the names.
He called me yesterday basically to say that.
He's been trying and can't do it.
Told him there's a great meme going around that this guy winning a bike race is today Focaccia. Mm-hmm. And I was like, if you just say that, honestly, you're close enough. So I think my dad's just going to be like going around at his job today. Like, did you see today Focaccia? Just really crushing the Tour de France. It's going to be great.
Fair enough.
We actually practiced Champs-Élysées together on the phone yesterday. It was great.
Okay. There you go.
Dave Herford getting cultured. Of course, this means now he's going to want to go to the Tour de France as well as to like Belgian cyclocross season. Yeah. So we may just have to move him to Europe for a year at some point.
Could do that.
Anyway, so our next, can we move on to our next question?
I think so. Just, boring. I think you had a recent article about boring training, and unfortunately that's the main thing. So you can have the odd 1% thing, you take your creatine or whatever your thing is, but just as Molly said, maybe one thing and believe in it, and otherwise keep it steady.
You get one hack. So we'll include a link to it in the show notes. I did an article for Runner's World that was in defense of boring training, and I have been pitching that article for literal years, and they've never let me do it. But I finally got the North American fastest women's 100-mile in the month of May. Stat.
Great title.
Great title. And because I had that, they finally were like, okay, fine, you can write this. So
Okay. Nice.
it only took me running 100 miles medium quickly to be allowed to write the article, because finally they're like, all right, this seems, maybe it's legit. So
Okay, is that something we can link to?
yep, we can link to that in the show notes.
Okay.
Cool. All right. Next question. Ideas for how to fit strength training into a cycling training program. I mean, we'll link to a couple of great episodes we have on strength training, just to kind of like touch on the basics. It's funny. I've been doing a lot of talks lately for some reason. And this question, or questions around like the mobility, the strength, like the extras, kind of keep coming up. And I know people who've listened to this podcast have heard me say this 800 times. But every time I say it, I see a woman like writing it down, or I have a woman come up to me after the thing, and it is like, this like just completely changed how I'm thinking about strength and mobility. And that's when I get up in the morning, the first thing I do is this little 10-minute routine that I've been doing for, I think over 10 years now. Because I remember the first day I did it was in Louisville, Kentucky, when we were there for cyclocross.
Trying to impress your new boyfriend.
Yep.
Okay.
No, I was trying to get paid to write an article about doing yoga every day for 30 days.
Right.
So I started doing it in the morning because there was no way I was going to find time to do yoga like later in the day. So it was actually honestly, I was literally just getting paid to write an article about, I did yoga every day for 30 days and this is what changed. So I started doing this like little yoga strength, whatever YouTube video every day.
Right.
And
Like you followed one. Molly
I
also
followed
we
one.
also do have yoga videos with Molly. Several are quite popular actually, especially with our coaching clients. They like pull up, what is the date that they always
it's like
pull
the
up?
October 2022 or something.
It's not the greatest quality. Is that one like live? I don't know if that one
I don't know if it is.
Or if that might be a client only, so you might have to sign up for coaching to get access to this popular October 22 Molly yoga video.
I was actually thinking we should redo a couple of them once we are in our new space and have a bit
let's
more.
not call it a studio because that's going to take
I
some
said
time.
space.
Okay.
I said space. Anyway, it's evolved over the years, right? Like I've added different physical therapy, like PT exercises that I was supposed to do for various injuries and issues. I've, added in more like planks. I've increased the number of push-ups that are in it. Like it's evolved over the years, but it's still that like 10-ish minute routine that I do pretty much every single morning.
What do you think resonates with people when you say that it's like it can be this yoga core routine in the morning?
I think it's the fact that like it's multi-purpose, right? Like it's like yoga combined with like body weight strength. So you're kind of like checking both boxes of like
And
the
we've
mobility.
had several grown men, I mean women probably too, but they don't groan as much, but who have been like crippled by Molly's yoga routine because it has a lot of push-ups and a lot of planks in it. So
you don't go straight into it. Like,
and you've progressed this over time, but you can do a fair number of push-ups, is pretty good. So again, it's sort of like hard for you, I think is the thing. And it's progressed a bit over time.
yeah, exactly. Like
Now-
every morning, it's not easy. Every morning I want to not do it, but every morning I do it. So I think what resonates is this idea that like, it doesn't have to be an hour. It doesn't have to be in a gym. It doesn't even have to include weights. And I think what the thing that resonates, and again, if you've listened to this, I apologize, you've heard me say this before, but it's the 10 minutes a day is over an hour a week. So even say you did 6 days a week, you miss a day here and there. That's an hour a week. That's 52 hours a year of strength training done without even really feeling like you had to like do something different to like make it happen, right? Like I'm doing it in my pajamas. I am not putting on strength training clothes or like a yoga outfit or like going somewhere. I'm literally rolling out of bed and doing this.
Yep.
So I think that's what makes people start to think, and even 2 minutes, right? Like 2 minutes, that's 15 minutes a week. That's an hour a month. That's 12 hours of strength training a year. So even if you just do, 30 seconds of push-ups, 30 seconds of squats, 30 seconds, like all of these little tiny things add up. And I think that's my big, like when you're time crunched and you've tried so many times to start a routine that's like 3 times a week I go to the gym and do this XYZ routine and you fall off after a week. Start with 2 minutes in the morning.
Sure. And it doesn't exclude that too. We have a few people we work with who do go to a gym because they won't do it, but when they're paying for it and it's on the calendar, then they seem to go once or twice a week. So you could certainly augment what Molly's doing with 1 or 2 gym sessions, and that's going to be even better. Right now you're going to have a bit of really heavy lifting, learning how to lift, because that's part of this thing too, is whatever age you're starting at is the age to start strength training. I think that's well understood. You should do it.
And we had Celine Yeager on talking about menopause and, all things lifting heavy shit a couple weeks ago. And I think that was her thing, was there's no bad time to start strength training. You're never going to be mad that you started it early.
And I don't think we got it out of her in that, but since I listen to her podcast every week, she also does something. It's sort of like easy strength, really, but she basically goes into her garage gym or wherever her gym is in her home and does, I think it's sort of like a 20-minute routine, and it varies a bit day to day. This might be like a split routine where it's whatever, it used to be back and chest or something like that, but front of body, back of body, lower body, upper body, whatever you want to split it. It can get more complicated or not. But that's also resonates with the easy strength program, which I really like. A lot of people we work with use some variation of an easy strength, which is a 3 to 5 days a week of something that takes 20 to 30 minutes. It depends how precious you are with your warm-ups and your cool downs.
I'm I do it in 10.
But it does start including bigger weights. So Molly edged into this from the yoga. So if that's attractive, start with yoga. Lots of yoga is basically lunges, squats, push-ups is your chaturanga. Planks are built in there. So a lot of these things that have been around for a long time have these elements, and people have been living for quite a long time and being functional doing pretty much only yoga. Certainly doing yoga is more like strength training than not doing any yoga. So that's, I think, where we often will start people is, what are you willing to do? What's it look like? And then slowly can we add a little bit of load or a bit more reps to it? And I think that's what gets missed with the lift heavy shit and the you have to do strength training. Is it's always a picture of someone either trap bar deadlifting or back squatting with a bar, and this is just imposing and not possible for the large majority of people. Do not have access to a gym environment due to time, money, location.
I was gonna say, even for us, we could go to a gym, but we tend to not really like driving anywhere. To ride to the gym would take a while, so we don't do it.
I mean, we're also cyclists and runners, so I think the heart of this question that was originally asked is, how do you fit this into a cycling routine? And the reality is it's sort of hard, and that's why we like Dan John's thing is that there's about 10% of the week, your training hours, should go to strength. And so even Dan John, who is a strength training person, he is not a cyclist at all. He says 10%, like your main sport is 80, I think he says. And then I think 10% is maybe like rejuvenation. And then 10% sort of this strength training piece. So 10 hours, that's maybe an hour. Molly said that's what it added up to if you did 10 minutes. Maybe someone like Celine does 3 by 20 to 30 minutes. Or maybe someone else does whatever, maybe they do a bit more, or they do a 1 hour session in there too. So there's lots of ways to solve that. So I think the biggest thing we look at is, how does this fit into your life? What is the way that we're going to sneak this in to the routine? Mm-hmm. So I would say the one thing, let's try and give a couple more practical ideas here, where what I'm seeing with athletes that I coach in season, because I think that once it gets crummy outside, it's not as hard to convince cyclists to do 2 and 3 and 5 days of strength training, right? I'll do it all the time. It sounds way better than riding the trainer, or at least equally painful. And so the one thing I'll see during the season is one day, maybe someone goes to the gym or whatever and does a 30 to 60 minute strength routine. We won't talk so much about the specifics. The key there, though, is that it's something that you're used to. This gets back to boring training. It's not exciting. It's not something new every single week. It's not pushing the limits and crippling yourself. It's just Dan John's easy strength, 2 by 5, 5 by 2, 3 by 3. Very simple. Pick the one you like. But it's not a lot heavier every week. It's not trying to PB, because this is more like the maintenance, the mobility, the activation of the muscle, range of motion you're not getting during your cycling and your running. And then you're pushing the limit. Hopefully, we just talked about the boring training is that once or twice a week, you are pushing the limits. And then once or twice a week, probably in endurance, you're pushing the limits of your energy and the availability time you have. So the strength training is really just in there. It's not remarkable. It's another unremarkable workout, especially during the season for someone who's competing, right? Or training heavily.
For sure. Yeah. And even in weeks around whether I'm racing or recovering from racing, I drop the weights by a few pounds, and I still do the strength. Like I still do my easy strength routine. I do the morning routine every day, except for race day. But I do easy strength a couple times a week too. And yeah, I just drop the weights down to where it's very manageable, but I'm still just going through the motions for two reasons. One, for all of like the actual strength training benefits and the, like you say, keeping the muscles working and everything. And two, to keep in the routine of it, because I know, especially if you race a few times a year, you know, if you decide like, okay, the week before I have a race and, you know, I'm not going to strength train because I want to be ready for the race, I'm tapering. And then the week after the race, you're like, well, I'm recovering, so I'm not going to strength train. Mm-hmm. Very quickly, it's so easy to get out of the habit of doing it. So even if you're using super light weights, just make yourself walk through the routine, or at least spend that time on mobility or something. But I think the key is to not take it out, not take it off of the schedule, even if you shift what it looks like.
Sure. In the same way that with our biking, we decrease the volume a little bit. We maybe do one less rep or one less set of an interval session. Maybe you do a coffee spin instead of an endurance spin, something like that. So what Molly's saying is probably fine. You'll also see a lot where it's, rather than doing 3 sets of 10 strength, now you do 3 sets of 5. So you decrease the reps of the strength and keep the load, the intensity about the same. You'll see a lot of that, or one set. A lot of times I'll just tell people, whatever your strength is, you're just going to warm up, do one set of everything, and then cool it down. And then that way it's the same routine. It just goes by in about half the time, because you just still are warming up and cooling down. And you can spend even a bit more time warming up and cooling down to get mobility and, again, activation. But you want to keep it, I think you're right, keeping that frequency up is going to help keep the routine. And again, if you try and think about it as activation and mobility, that seems to click for a lot of people, where even the day after, this is a CrossFit thing, actually. CrossFit Endurance used to always have like a recovery strength, which almost sounds like a, what's that, like
oxymoron?
Yeah, where, you know, the Sunday afternoon after your long run, or Monday on your usual off day, they do one set of these strength things, and some of them required a bit of effort, but the concept would be that you're activating and you're going through the range of motion, the mobility, and then the muscles are getting blood flow and sort of coming back online. And it makes a lot of sense. And so there's a mental hurdle to doing it, because you're very mentally fatigued. You think you've earned this time off, but there's also this idea that you might feel better after one set. And I think you'll see that a lot, where as cyclists, a lot of times we want to come out of the gym feeling better, more mobile, more activated, more athletic, rather than crippled. And you'll see that I saw a coach, this ultra running coach, that he just had said something that I just was like, I wanted to almost start a Facebook argument. And then I was like, no, I need to not be on this. But it was sort of to this thing that like, oh, people never go to failure in the gym. And when you think you're at failure, you should push even harder. And I was like,
no,
I mean, probably I can see where many of us could work a little harder sometimes, but it's in the details of when and how much and what does that mean. And again, getting to this idea of consistency, that person is going to eventually figure out pushing more, assuming they keep coming back. So I don't know. It was just sort of an odd way to look at it.
That feels very old school, no pain, no gain.
And central to what we're talking about, it's what cyclists do every time they go to the gym. They go once in the fall and they feel really tired and sore and maybe are injured, and then they never go back to the gym. And that just happens all the time. So at least as like a general advice on Facebook, if you and I were in the gym and I said, Molly, I think like we've been training for 6 weeks here, you aren't maybe making gains, or we've been at the same weight, I think you need to push. Then that would be a targeted specific thing. But as a general advice, I think most people could just focus on a little less, a little better form, and then come back again and try it again in a few days.
For sure, yeah. I think the last thing I'll maybe add is, this question is how to fit strength training into a cycling training plan. I think the thing is, you're not fitting strength in. Strength is part of a good cycling training plan. Like, I think we need to just stop thinking of strength as like this thing that's over here. No, like it's going to make you a better cyclist. It's like, forget all the health and longevity, blah, blah, blah benefits of strength training. Like, it's actually part of improving your power on the bike. Mm-hmm. So just don't think about them as separate. Think about them as, this is just part of the training plan.
I think what you would see, is that it's like a general athleticism is what you're trying to train. You're trying to get stronger. You're trying to be mobile, But I think you're also trying to develop movement skills that might scale across to biking. And biking's not that athletic in most situations, like until it has to be. And so if you watch someone like Christopher Blevins or some of these just amazing, like even Vanderpool, like even on the road, which again, road is even less athletic most of the time. But when you watch people, when stuff goes bad, like Pitcock would be like that too, where they're sliding sideways, two wheels are drifting, and they somehow get a foot down and like bounce back, and they don't hit the deck. Or when people actually do hit the deck, you can see it in that they like roll out of it. That's one of the things Dan John said, is that we as cyclists should be practicing tumbling and rolling, which was just, I was like, but then I guess it makes sense, because if you can roll yourself out of a crash and not break your arm or collarbone or rotator cuff, there you're back training. And it's like, well, was that worth it to do a bit of goofy movement training? If Molly doesn't ruin her hamstring because she's been doing her downward dog every morning for 10 years.
I almost kicked you in the junk this morning. Sorry about that.
Leveled me. I'm out for a week here with a groin issue.
Well, you shouldn't have been walking, but you know the routine. I've done it for 10 years.
I mean, usually your mobility isn't great. The leg's bent and I yell at you, your leg's bent.
How did you not see it coming?
She made progress. So all that to say, that's the other way you can think about strength, is that it's also giving you a bit of dexterity that then you could apply to the trail when things go bad, or when you're trying to invent new maneuvers as you're sliding around a corner or something.
Or jumping out of the way of your wife's leg coming.
Right. Or a competitor. The only, we say this every time, the thing though that to add is that Molly's 5-minute core in the hotel room, wherever you are, you can drop and do 5 push-ups and then do 5 lunges and then do 5 push-ups and then 5 squats and then 5 push-ups and then 5 whatever. And this could this have more pulling or more different moves side to side or twirling or tumbling? Sure, it could. But if you don't know what to do, like you probably know 2 motions. You know a push-up and you know something like a squat or a lunge. That can be done every single day. There's no reason you can't do it before your run or after your run or in the morning or at lunch or between calls or before bed. Just find a place that it fits and just do a little bit, because most of us are not doing any of it. And you're going to see, again, these benefits in mobility, flexibility, athleticism, and then also, I think, strength. And yes, eventually it needs to be heavier, but most of us just need to start doing it and then it'll be beneficial.
Perfect. Okay, with that, let's wrap there. As always, keep the questions coming. ConsummateAthlete.com. We have an anonymous forum linked that's also in the show notes. And of course, follow on Consummate Athlete on Instagram, rate, review the podcast, etc., etc. All right, happy training. We'll see you next week. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. If you want to hear more training, racing, and endurance sport advice, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating and review. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at consummateathlete.com for a weekly dose of inspiration and advice straight to your inbox.